Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. I'm thrilled to have a guest I've been following and admiring for quite some time, Dr. Joe Klemczewski. He's not only a former seasoned competitor and masters athlete, but also the founder of the Diet Doc, and he holds a PhD. His wealth of knowledge and experience in the bodybuilding and fitness world spans decades, making him a go-to expert for evidence-based approaches to contest prep, fitness coaching, and overall health. What I truly appreciate about his work is how he translates complex scientific information into practical advice that's easy to understand and apply, not just for bodybuilders, but for the general population and coaches as well. His content resonates deeply with coaches like me because he understands the unique challenges we face while working with clients. I do also value the fact that he's just about the same age as me, and I am, and has been training for just as long, and that is hard to come by. Without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with a true powerhouse in the fitness world. Welcome, Dr. Joe.
Yep.
How are you?
Great. Good to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I love bodybuilding. I love all things contest prep. I'm a coach myself, and I've been a nurse for since 1997, and I left in 2020 to really do full-time coaching. So,
Great.
it's really my passion. So I really love having conversations with people, and I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I've been following you for a while because I really appreciate all the content you put out, not just for coaches, really, right? And for the everyday person and bodybuilders. So there's not a lot of people who do that, and I really love that. So can you share a bit about your background, how you got into bodybuilding, and what inspired you to pursue a PhD? And actually, what is your PhD in?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for mentioning all the different things I do, because sometimes I feel like it's an obstacle to do, multiple things, and then people don't really know what you do. So, obviously for some people it kind of hits, with what we do as coaches. But my background is much like yours. I started in an allied health medical field, physical therapy specifically. And even prior to that, I started going to college while I was in the military, and I just assumed marketing, business management was the way to go. I was a child of the 80s, and so it just seemed like, that was what you did, make money, go into business, that sort of thing. But there was just something in me that thought that would be pretty unfulfilling. I love training. I love sport, performance sport. I was getting into physique sport. And so even at a time where exercise science wasn't really a thing, certainly nutrition for the non-dietitian was not even a thing. Dietetics was not even truly on the map. And so a friend of mine suggested physical therapy. And I thought, okay, that seems interesting. I love to train. I love sports. I love performance. So I did that, and that was my entire intent, even though I had been lifting weights since I was 11 or 12 years old. That kind of took a life of its own once I got out of high school and out of, what I would consider my baseball years. And I started looking at bodybuilding specifically as a competitive sport. Again, pre even social media, we all kind of gathered around Muscle and Fitness, Flex magazine to see what was going on in that world. So I guess it was after I had won my WNBF pro card, I had decided, this is fun. I mean, I can see myself doing even something outside of physical therapy for a living, and I had completed my first doctorate in nutrition, because once I finished physical therapy school and did my CSCS, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, I was just in the habit of going to school. And I thought, man, I'm going to be bored if I don't do something. So I decided, well, this will be fun. It'll help my bodybuilding career. I'll do a doctorate in nutrition while I'm working. And that was as far as I thought I would ever go. Just doing it to, help my adjunct bodybuilding career. And then I found an opportunity to create a gym, buy something that kind of existed as a personal training studio. And I could combine physical therapy, personal training, nutrition consulting. And I made a big entrepreneurial jump in the mid to late 90s. And then everything just kind of took off from there because once I became a WNBF pro, that organization asked me to start writing for their magazines. I became their chief science editor for almost 15 years. And as I was writing, I had to create content for their magazines. They had, I believe, at one time, 5 magazines I was writing monthly or quarterly articles for. Just I was always having to come up with topics and ideas, and so I started writing about contest prep. This little theory I constructed in the mid '90s called flexible dieting, macronutrient tracking. I thought, well, that might help some people, so I started writing about that, and then because of some of those novelties I created, started getting invited to a lot of fitness camps and science conferences, and here we are.
Well, that's an amazing background. It really is. What happened to the magazines? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well,
I
the
remember those
whole
magazines.
yeah, the digital world just kind of
Yeah,
tanked a
right.
lot of print media.
Yeah, I remember going to nursing school. I would be sitting in lectures and I would just have the Muslim Fitness magazine and I would be watching that instead of listening to the lecture with me. But that's how much I love bodybuilding at the time too.
Right.
Because I was, Valley Total Fitness was just opening, probably late 80s, early 90s. And I remember I walked into that gym. I hired a coach, I hired a trainer, and he was a skinny little thing, and he was taking me through the circuit. You remember the machines, they go beep, 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 beep. Remember those
Oh,
ones?
gotcha. There you go.
Do you remember those machines?
Nice.
And
Yes.
the next time he trained me, I brought in a picture of Corey Everson. I said, "Listen, this is what I want to look like." He's like, "Oh my gosh, we have to revamp your whole entire workout." I'm like, "Yeah, I want muscle," because I was just a naturally gifted athlete. I was born athletic, so I just really wanted to train. And I was an adult, and like, what can you do as an adult at that time? It was really I just fell in love with bodybuilding, and I did compete for A and BC, right?
Mm,
A and BF.
gotcha.
A and BF, yeah. So they only had bodybuilding. They
Hmm.
only had bodybuilding back then. So, and then I came back and started with bikini. So, and pro card in OCB and WNBF bikini. And interesting enough, I want to get into this maybe later, but I've been competitive at the national level at NPC, and I was top four, top three, and I cannot crack the top five anymore. Because I've been natural. These girls are getting bigger. Their shoulder caps are just outgrowing mine because, of course, they're doing PADs and I'm not doing that. So now this fit model came out and I'm thinking, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's hard to be competitive at that level at that time, but fit model. Maybe I'll have an opportunity. We'll see. So we'll get into that because I do want to discuss that. I really wanted to get in, as a master's athlete yourself, have you personally adapted your training and nutrition over the years, like to maintain what you have, but also to even get stronger?
Hmm. Well, I did have a nice run after I retired. So, before I was 40, I had already hung up the trunks. I retired from the WNBF. Just reached a point where my kids were entering their teenage years and something had to go. And so I thought I'd probably accomplish as much as I was going to as a pro. I'm a very average, genetic bodybuilder. So with my strengths and weaknesses, it was just going to be competing for fun and I needed to make a little bit more room into my life. But for the next 10 or so years, I continued to train extremely hard, achieved my lifetime best deadlift, years after I had retired into my 40s. At that time, I explored some things just to get back more to the performance side. So I was doing, not a ton of distance type work with cardio, but certainly more functional cardio, functional training, along with my standard linear bodybuilding type training and powerlifting training. So I really added more to my training life than I took away. And then in my late 40s, I guess I started with kind of a knee surgery that may have, taken a 6 month or even year chunk of time away from squatting quite as heavy. And then a herniated disc in my neck that was troublesome in my early 20s had degenerated sufficiently enough to where now there's some issues there. And I think just general, decreasing mobility into my mid 50s. I've had to make some concessions where I've just decided, okay, training like I have for 40 some years is just not fruitful for me any longer. I'm never going to be stronger. And so now incorporating a little bit more useful mobility and functional type training, plus still trying to maintain strength.
Right.
So right now Aaron, train a little bit more toward the movement than I do toward muscle. I certainly want to maintain muscle, but now I'm happier sometimes going into the gym and saying, well, for today's workout, I'm going to do squats and this, and this. It's not just like quote leg training or quad training, where I'm going to do my deadlifts plus this today. So I want to keep the movements there. I want to keep my strength. I want to keep lean body mass, but it's not really for forward leaning hypertrophy.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. I'm kind of old school still.
Well, if you're
I
if you're competing, you have to be.
You have to be, and I feel freedom when I think of the thought of not competing anymore because I feel how I'm going to change my training. I feel like I want to be holistically fit. I want to be like cardiovascular fit. I want to have like more movement patterns, maybe 3 days a week full body, and then the other days some functional stuff and cardio. So I feel like in the competitive mindset, it holds me back a little bit. But and every year I say, oh, I'm not going to compete again, and here I am again. But I think that I want to get into menopause because menopause is such a huge topic right now. I'm sure you've noticed that. And what I find is that the OBGYNs who don't get educated as an MD, and they don't, as a nurse, I didn't get educated in menopause, unfortunately. It's not really talked about. They get as little training as they do in nutrition about menopause, unfortunately. But what's happening now is the doctors now coming out who are going through menopause, and it's like, why aren't we talking? How come nobody's talking about this? And the Women's Health Initiative that you hear about, that study in the early 2000s, they've scared everybody about, estrogen causes cancer. So 75% of women stopped taking it. The doctors stopped prescribing it, and there was a big scare. And now they're coming out and saying it's the opposite. Estrogen is amazing. Everybody should be on it. So what I'm learning now, which is very interesting to me, is that estrogen is anabolic.
Mhm. For
So
sure.
can you explain that? Because if it's anabolic, I find that very interesting because, there's all this, you shouldn't do, I'm going to say menopause therapy instead of hormone replacement therapy, because hormone replacement therapy, people think PEDs. They think you're doing it to get an edge on your competitor. And the doses for the menopause therapy are extremely low, and they're not for enhancing a physique. So can you talk about that? First of all, estrogen as an anabolic, and then
Mhm.
PEDs versus what menopause therapy is.
Yeah, just for a minute to even explain hormones in general, because I see so much chatter online about that. Hormones, hormones, hormones. I'm a
Right.
coach who can fix your hormones. And of course, as you know, as a nurse, hormones are chemical messengers in the body. They're produced by endocrine or exocrine glands, and they signal other cells, tissues, or glands. And people categorize them in different ways, sometimes by just chemical structure, like lipid-based or peptide or protein-based, sometimes by function, which I think is best for our use. So think of the androgens or sex hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen as the androgen class, and those are for reproduction as well as lean body mass, that sort of thing. Then there are the thyroid hormones that control metabolism, the digestive hormones, big in the news, obviously, with GLPs, but things like insulin, glucagon, and those kind of peptides. Then catecholamine hormones, which are way more important than people think, because those are the ones that are uh, dealing with movement, and they're stimulated by movement. So you can increase, for example, the adrenaline hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, substantially by, your intensity of training, even cardio. So you can go, kind of on down the line of what hormone classes do what. And the reason everybody in our world is interested in the androgens, first of all, is because of the anabolic nature, like you described. They help build muscle, maintain muscle, but they also control and are controlled by the reproductive, needs, quote unquote, of the body. So Women, and I think most people know this by now, but they have testosterone and they need testosterone. And currently, a lot of doctors who are trying to help women through menopause, perimenopause, just aging in general, are finally starting to look at testosterone as a possible master hormone to measure and manipulate instead of just estrogen and progesterone. You remember the days, I'm sure some doctors still do this, but 10, 15, 20 years ago, women would get pellets implanted under their skin,
Yeah, they
kind of a
still do. Yep, yep.
slow releasing, right? And now, I think different methods are a little bit more accurate in terms of delivering the dose. But to your point, estrogen is an anabolic hormone like testosterone. It just happens to be that women per percentage have more estrogen for their, sex reproductive needs versus testosterone for men. But an awful lot of females that I know who are reaching menopause and beyond, their physicians are now saying, hey, you should be around 18, 20, 24 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone, and you're at 3, you're at 6, you're at 8. Why don't we get that back up to 20 or 30 and see how you do with things like hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, fatigue, and all of these women who are just addressing that are loving it. They're finding phenomenal results because I think the way that endocrinologists and general practitioners used to try to chase around estrogen and progesterone, it's just more difficult because, as you know, through the menstrual cycle, or even if you're in menopause, what used to be a menstrual cycle, kind of shadows of that, those hormone levels are still very much in flux. And so to try to chase that is more difficult than saying, hey, let's just bring your testosterone up. And if your body uses, what it needs, then, some of that might be aromatized into estrogen if you need it. But I think that's the way some of the medical field is turning right now.
Yeah, so let's bring that into the natural bodybuilding because as a coach and I only work with women over the age of 40. Now I'm getting messages saying, "Can you coach me? I can no longer be in the Natural Federation because I chose to do menopause therapy." And so they take this small dose of testosterone, probably some thyroid, all prescribed from a responsible doctor, and they're literally kicked out. And these are former pros, that now they have to compete. And you know what the figure natural competitors look like naturally compared to the ones who are not. You just don't hold a candle to them, So now I'm trying I say, hey, you'd be great in bikini, and I just feel like, should there be a conversation for female masters athletes who are taking menopause therapy to, accelerate their health, not to build or to be competitive or use this as an anabolic advantage, for their competitors. So I put a post in one of these big bodybuilding groups. There was 100 comments, a lot of people arguing, well, you shouldn't be on stage. And even the person who takes estrogen shouldn't be competing against somebody who has no estrogen. So it's this big divide, and I just kind of want to get your stance on, women taking testosterone. I think it's like 0.1 milligrams, some of them, right? And can no longer compete in the natural federations.
Yeah, that is ironically the biggest exodus I've seen away from the natural organizations are
Yes.
masters competitors, men and women who decide, hey, I'm doing some form of TRT, so I'm out. Now I've got to go to the NPC. Then, of course, to your natural point that, now they're on such a small dose, it's not really an anabolic advantage.
Right.
But since that door is opened, I've even had some clients who say, well, maybe I'll just up my dose a little bit, maybe just a little bit more. Maybe I'll add a little Anavar since I'm already on testosterone, because they really do feel that competitive drive to still improve. And there's just no path forward in the natural organizations. I will say, even my wife, who is mid 50s like me, just out of curiosity, I told her, at her last OBGYN appointment, like, just see if your doctor will do a blood panel for hormones because she's never had that. And her doctor just flat out refused, saying, do you have any symptoms? Well, then you don't need it. You don't need it. And I thought, wow, that is really kind of crappy. I mean,
Yes, it
why
is.
not know? Because if you can feel better, if there is evidence that your health would improve, so maybe you have to go to a specific, anti-aging longevity type physician, but a lot of doctors are hesitant to do that because some people are just seeking these out,
Right.
for reasons other than health.
Well, for all those listening, it's menopause.org. Menopause.org is all OBGYNs who get certified in menopause. And now it's become their passion. They want to help you. So I would do that research, find a really good doctor because they should be checking estrogen. Because now they're saying it's for heart health, it's to prevent dementia, helps brain fog, it helps maintain and build muscle mass. So there's so many benefits. Dr. Mary Haver Claire, I don't know if you've heard of her, she's very outspoken. She's an OBGYN. She has a book, there's a book called Estrogen Matters, how important estrogen is in a female's life. So, and of course you can do it all naturally, and and that's fine too. Some people really suffer with just the hot flashes because a hot flash can be extremely anxiety provoking for a female. Now, I have been under the bar doing heavy squats and a hot flash comes on out of nowhere, and you have these two different reactions, like I'm squatting but I'm having this hot flash. And it's like the human response is, wait, hot flash, should I put the bar down? Should I keep going? It's a very confusing space to be in. And even when you're just like, it's outside and it comes on, it starts like in my abdomen and it goes up my chest and up my head, and it is like a boom, boom, boom. I have to rip my clothes, my sweatshirt off, anything, wherever I am, whenever I'm driving, I have to pull over. If my son's in the car, it's 18 degrees. I got to roll down the windows. So for women who have anxiety, it can be very anxiety provoking just to go through that. So for that alone to take something to help them is extremely life changing. And I've had clients come to me and say, when I work with them, after I took menopause therapy or estrogen or even a tiny dose of testosterone, before that, they felt like a shell of a human. And then they got their life back. You know what I mean? So it can be life changing for some. And it's a very personal decision. And it's a very hot topic right now. So now a lot of arguments going on in the social media world. And I truly try to stay out of that. So that's a good conversation to have. I want to ask you about, you being very successful at what you do as a coach. What advice would you give, coaches who are just newer? How do they become successful? How do they get clients? There's so much competition right now in the social media world. Like, what advice would you give for coaches?
That's a really, really great question because that's what I spend most of my time doing is certifying, mentoring, coaching coaches to build their careers. And I will say, being the first guy to do this for a living in the 90s and kind of, show the world that this is a viable occupation, I wasn't sure how that would evolve because of it being a non-dietetic pursuit in a world where the dietetic legislative, goals had been met. They had completely blocked anybody from doing any kind of nutrition work. Now that has been softened in a couple different ways. But originally, my goal after working with an intellectual property attorney was to create a company that would formally franchise or license our services, our program, with the coverage of our medical director and our dietetics director. We became an entity legal to do that so that any coach, any nutrition coach could do it without fear of legal pursuit or prosecution, that sort of thing. And then some states have changed their legislation so that as long as you're not doing medical nutrition therapy, you're okay. And I like that because it puts us more on par with personal training. You don't have to be an orthopedic surgeon, you don't have to be a physical therapist, you don't even have to be certified as a personal trainer. You just have to be careful and stay within your scope of practice as a personal trainer, which is still ill-defined, but at least it's been accepted for decades. And so now personal nutrition coaching has followed suit. So I came along and being the first one, it was just wide open fields and I did grow a successful company and we've had a lot of fun over the years increasing our footprint into things, as I mentioned, licensing, certifications, etc. But now people coming on board saying, I want to do that too. There are pros and cons to this being the internet age where everybody can have visibility. You can have that form of advertising for free, but what does it really get you? You're only talking to your own audience. So you have to very quickly decide how I'm going to differentiate myself. As soon as you and I met, I realized, okay, Erin is a pro. She's also a nurse, so she has this allied health and medical background. She has a lot to offer. That's somebody who could really do well. But you still have to work. Like you still have to, it's very competitive. You still have to be seen. You still have to increase your audience in this attention economy. So what I tell coaches now is when you hear stats like 90% of all businesses fail and 90% of all businesses fail because they're undercapitalized, they can't sustain losses for a while until they build some profitability. 10 or 15 years ago, anybody could just say, I'm a nutrition coach and you're making six figures. It's just never going to be that way again. It's too competitive. There's too much access to everybody. So you have to be ready for a little bit of a slog. You have to be ready to work and have a long-term plan. Maybe keep your feet in your current career and plan to transition more slowly. But you definitely have to have some kind of differential. And I love a handful of marketing and business leaders, one being Seth Godin, who has kind of a famous line, which is you want a minimum viable audience. You don't want everybody. If you have 200 million followers, are they really all interested in what you're doing per se, in your specialty, or do you have 10,000 followers who really do exactly what you do? Like that's you are their voice in a certain field, a certain area. So minimum viable audience means having the most narrow niche you can, specialization, and then being the best at that. And even though it's counterintuitive, that's how you can grow more layers to that because you are a true expert at one thing. As I'm hearing you talk, Aaron, women's health, nurse, female masters, bodybuilder, competitor. It makes sense. Like you are an authority in those areas. So you're the perfect example of somebody who has narrowed a focus into a space where you can be a very credible, viable expert.
Yes, thank you. It's extremely challenging. What I find interesting, like, I'm just about to hit 10K on Facebook, and man, that has taken a long time, right? And I have done certifications, virtually with people, and I've got certified. I did the Physique Coaching Academy. Um, I've noticed and a particular person I graduated that with, she had like 1,000 followers, and all of a sudden overnight she has 1 million. So these people are paying for followers, and because people relate the amount of followers with what you have with your knowledge. Oh, she has 1 million followers. She must know what she's talking about, right? And so everybody goes over there. So if you see somebody who only has like 1,000 followers, nobody's going to make comments because they're actually nervous. They're going to be the first one. They don't know what they're talking about. It's like, in the 80s, we used to go dancing. Who would be on the dance floor first? It's kind of the same thing, right? Then once one person does it, then it starts to fall into place. But I don't like the paid followers. I have to be honest. I believe in hard work, everything. I've never paid for a single follower, and I'm proud of myself for that. But so keeping with the coaching, how do you handle when your clients don't follow the plan, and because of that, they don't get results, and it's almost like they want to blame you?
Mhm. I think one of my natural personality traits is to Be patient and caring and understanding a lot of the struggles they may be having. And so, literally, with a couple of my clients today, I've had that conversation with them. One who had kind of went off grid, what was suddenly not weighing, not reporting certain things, and when she finally comes back, kind of frustrated, she's up 10 pounds. Another person, very similarly, kind of new to coaching with me and doing really, really great, and then very similarly, just less communication. I'm having to hunt her down and find out she's struggling. So, perhaps just being more inviting. I don't. Well, I mean, maybe some coaches are idiots who are like angry and like yelling, and it's my way or the highway. That's certainly not what a normal person does. But I think we have to be more proactive at even just reaching out and saying, "Hey, are you okay? Are you struggling? I know I'm not seeing some of the subjective information that we were tracking. Are you having a problem? Are you slipping? Just us to your point about the dancing metaphor. Like we have to be the ones to get off the wall and onto the dance floor first. We have to go out there first and invite the client with us. So especially when they're just getting started with us, they haven't necessarily built up a rapport or trust. And so they feel embarrassed if they're struggling and they feel like maybe I'm the only one who's not doing this right. And so we just have to be better at reaching out and letting clients know that we expect you to have some struggles. We all do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's taken me a long time to get to that point, I think, because as a competitor, it was hard to go from competitor to I do a lot of lifestyle. But what I do is like at the end, we do a photo shoot because they have 12 weeks to get to their goal, or they can do the next one. So it's interesting to, my clients have taught me a lot about myself, patience, understanding. And, I get that from being a nurse as well, but I feel a little more, we got to get to your goal. Some of it is health related. If you don't lose the weight, this is really important. This is like you're gonna have a heart attack. So I can be firm but caring because I do care. And I'm currently a client. For the first time, I hired somebody for the off season because I want to go to nationals again this year. And it's been interesting to be a client because it's the typical, I just send my check-in and I get a feedback once a week. If I have a question, it's not answered until the following week, and sometimes it doesn't get answered. And I'm glad I've had that experience because I realized, wow, I give a lot because every Tuesday night, all my clients, we do a Zoom call. They have an opportunity to ask questions. It's a whole entire hour. And then they do a check-in with me 2 days later. So they have 2 times where they're checking in with me. They also send me their form videos and I give them the feedback. So always in really close contact with them for the entire amount of time. And I'm just happy to have had the opportunity to be a client myself, to realize what the difference is, and also, the price point because I'm not cheap, but I'm well worth it, to be honest. So yeah, it's nice to have that opportunity. So let me just think about some other questions I had. So I have like women, I generally don't like to work with beginners because it's really hard to work with beginners virtually because my program is about building muscle, right? Especially at our age group, how important it is. So I generally don't work with them. So I have clients who like they'll slip into my program and they'll send me their form videos and clearly they're pretty new, right? Because I can just tell they don't have the body awareness. They don't really know which weight to pick. They're doing it wrong. And then, 8 weeks later, I just had a client say to me, it's been 8 weeks. I'm doing 12 reps, like you said, and I don't see any changes. So, and I try to educate them on how, it takes time for intuitive awareness to come. You need to be under the bar for a certain amount of time. So what would you say to somebody like that? It's been 8 weeks. I'm doing 12 reps and I don't see change.
Yeah, I have a client who just emailed me this morning in his check-in, actually just through our coaching app. And, he reminded me that we've been together for more than a decade. And, he's come a long way. I see his beginning photos to where he's at now as a competitor, somebody who's in bodybuilding. And yet, his genetics are his genetics. He's not somebody necessarily who's going to be an easy pro card or a successful pro. He's, tall, lanky, ectomorphic. And yet, where he has come from is amazing. It's just truly amazing. And yet, because he goes to a contest and gets beat by somebody who's a little bit shorter, more muscular, etc., he's frustrated. Why can't I get there? What am I doing wrong? So, to explain to somebody the genetic phenotype differences and the fact that, like my client, a true example that bodybuilding is measured in years and decades.
Right.
In some of my PowerPoint presentations, I use myself as an example as well as some other clients. Look at my contest prep photos in my 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., and look at how much my body has changed. And I will even tell them, here's a picture of me at my first contest. Here's a picture of me at my last contest. How much muscle do you think I gained in weight? What do you think my weight difference was? The average person will say 20 to 30 pounds, like you gained 20 to 30 pounds. And I'll say, nope, I was the exact same weight.
Yeah.
But I literally look like I gained 20 to 30 pounds of muscle because the shape of the muscle, the density, as you said, time under the bar, like everything changes because of that slow hypertrophic process that just doesn't happen instantly. You'll get 90 to 95% of your gross weight change in the first year of serious training, but you can keep making serious progress beyond that in just the shape of your muscle, the strength of your body. So absolutely, I have this conversation with clients all the time. You've got to be patient and you got to be in it for the long haul. Compare your accomplishments year to year to year, not this week to last week.
Yes, that's great advice. Thank you. All right, so switching over to Ozempic,
Mm.
because obviously that is a big theme right now also. So what's happening with Ozempic, and me as a nurse, I've seen so many people rely on so many different drugs for silly things like headaches, have been prescribed simple things to Tylenol to ibuprofen. That didn't work, so they would put them on literally a cardiac medication. If this is the same person I'm talking about, they switch them to a bipolar drug, and then one for like to help with sleeping. I mean, this is like a person that tried 4 different drugs from the same doctor. That has been my experience. So my experience with the medical system, being in it for so long is like I try not to heavily rely on pharmaceuticals. And I know that Ozempic is a great drug for those who need it, right? Those who are extremely obese, tried everything. They are going to die if they don't do something. It's really great for them. What is happening right now, Dr. Joe, is women in their 40s showing up on my calls 130 pounds. Oh, I've been on Ozempic for 5 months and I only dropped 7 pounds. I'm like, well, first of all, why are you on Ozempic? You're 130 pounds. So it's the same thing with, if you think people are going to take advantage of like the hormone therapy, people are absolutely taking advantage of this Ozempic drug. And so that's my gripe with that drug. Well, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's very complex because going back to genetics, I would say, first of all, just for a little historical context, go back to 1960. Our obesity rate was around 2%. Japan's obesity rate was around 2%. Today, Japan's obesity rate is still 2%. Ours is about 40%. You take somebody from Japan, bring them to the US, and their obesity rate climbs. So clearly, environment, food availability, and our behavior has an impact, but it's also because of the environment in which we live, but both socially as well as just, access to the foods and the processed foods that have proliferated so much. And so you really have to look at just the human genome, and many doctors have, and say, okay, is it possible, just from a public health perspective, for a human being to be surrounded by every single indulgence and processed food available? I can eat as much ice cream as I want all day long. I can go to McDonald's all day long. I can anything I want. Is it possible for us to stay lean, to go back to a 2% obesity rate instead of 40%. And that included in a 70%, 70% of our population is overweight or obese. Um, and I think the answer is going to be ultimately no, because we have evolved as a species to not starve to death. The number one drive we have is to not starve. And so from our hypothalamus to our nucleus accumbens to dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to our entire endocrine system, when you taste something sweet or you're hungry, you go into a frenzied mode to overeat. And to control that, with just our cognition, our will, is way more difficult than people think. I mean, they've done human studies, rodent models, etc. And so those people who have the good fortune to be able to control their weight however they want, just genetically, somehow, some way, it's easy for them to look at everybody else and say, "What's wrong with you idiots? Like, just stop eating." And yet it's just not that easy. And so to this point, there are more than 250 genes identified that directly cause obesity. If you don't have those sets of genes, you're not going to be obese. If you do, you will. That's going to be it. So, how do we get back to a reduced level? That's where the GLP has created some magic because it literally shuts down those systems. Because of the GLP and GIP combination of baroreceptors in your small intestine and stomach so that you feel fuller, to slow down digestion, to directly cross the blood-brain barrier and decrease even the pursuit of food. That's why it's now being studied for alcoholism and other addictions, because it just dopaminergically decreases that drive toward excess. So I think you're going to see more and more evolutions of better and better medications and maybe reduced doses for maintenance and all sorts of things, because like you said, if you need this to not die, it may be the only thing you have to not die. Somebody who has cholesterol issues or blood pressure issues, you have those medications, you have statins. You can now take those and not die. You can live another 30 or 40 years where you would have died a century ago. So should we look at those people and say, no, take those statins away, take that blood pressure and lower medication away, just exercise? Like there will be a place for these, but I love where you're going, which is take what you need, realize that these things just reduce hunger. So when you've reached your goal weight and you come back off of these, guess what? You're going to be hit with the same hunger. And if
Right.
you couldn't handle it before, what makes you think you can handle it now? So you better look at these as a gift. Like you have a chance to lose this weight without feeling the hunger, without it, costing you quite as much in terms of willpower and work and sacrifice. But you will have to pay that price down the road if you want to maintain this success. So you sure better start working on it now. While you're taking these medications, you better start learning about nutrition. You better start figuring out how you're going to incorporate some of those habits and behaviors, because you're not going to succeed long term if you don't.
Right. And you have these conversations with your clients about this
A-
because yeah.
Absolutely.
And because, I honestly didn't think I would work with anybody who was on them. But I do have a client now who she's not terribly overweight, but she does have a lot of cardiac risks. So we had a conversation. I said, okay, if you're going to work with me on this, I need you to be in some type of therapy. That's just me as a nurse. I have the knowledge and the awareness to refer out. So she said, oh, I'm already am. I said, oh, good.
Mhm.
Because and I own an in-person studio. So she's showing up at 5:30 in the morning for like the past couple weeks. I did a 3-minute step test with her. You know what that is. Her heart rate, Dr. Joe, was 176 after stepping up and down for just 3 minutes. So she's completely deconditioned, and even though I know 100% we can do this without the drug, she's made her decision. She's working with her doctor. She's really doing amazing. And I feel so blessed to be able to work with her because she has told me she's went into other gyms and they just push. And she's so nervous. Her heart rate's so high. She thinks she's going to have a heart attack. So she
Mhm.
would just quit these programs. So now with me, I know her heart rate's 176 at only 3 minutes. So if she's going to push the sled, it's going to be 15 seconds. And then she's going to walk. And we're checking her heart rate literally every 30 seconds. All right, keep walking till your heart rate gets back down. Keep walking. Even with the strength training, her heart rate shoots up to like 140. I'm like, all right, keep walking, walking, walking. So this is a learning experience for me to work with somebody who's on this medication while, going through this. I honestly didn't think that I would, but I'm really proud of her efforts. And I think, we'll be seeing a lot more of that. Um, okay. So let me go through some other questions I had for you. We talked about that. And all right, let's see. In your opinion, what are the 5 biggest changes in bodybuilding and fitness over the past 20 to 30 years? And what do you think has been positive and what we've benefited from, and some of them that have not?
Okay, five. I have to keep track on my hand here. Number one, I thought bodybuilding was kind of dying. Like I literally, when I retired as a competitor, I even spent about a decade not coaching bodybuilders anymore. I kind of gave that to some staff and some coaches in our network. Um, and then along came men's physique and women's figure, and then classic bodybuilding and bikini, and then wellness, and now fit model. And of course, the popularity has surged because they become that much more inclusive. So I think what has happened, a little bit of a precursor to that, my first thing I would say what has changed is just so many more people were rising to the top genetically. And so there were fewer and fewer. You look at people like Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman and, all these people who would win 6, 7, 8 Olympias in a row, Linda Murray. And everybody who just had the best genetics, they were just camping out and owning those spots. And so by widening it out and changing criteria for different divisions and giving people different homes and different body structure types to kind of aspire to, I think that revived the sport. And so that's kind of the second thing in response to the first that was very helpful. The third would be that on the PED side, it's just so normalized now
Oh,
that a lot of women who just like, hey, I'm just going to compete in my first show. What drug should I use? Tell me what I should use. That's obviously a negative at large. On the nuance side, as we're discussing with getting older and TRT and menopausal therapies and so forth, responsible amounts, physician supervised, can be helpful to increase your vitality and orthopedic health long term. But I think that has even created a bit of a fourth interesting thing, which is when I started coaching and somebody would hire me, I always thought that was also something that wasn't going to last. Like, how weird is it that somebody's going to pay me to get them ready for a contest? Now you almost wouldn't even think of competing without one. You even have a coach now because, hey, why not? Maybe I can learn something, and it's great to have another set of eyes on me, and I can be objective and not have to worry about every decision. So that's become something that's normalized, and I think both helpful and not, because you have a lot of ridiculously stupid, unqualified coaches hurting and literally killing people every year. But the fifth thing I would say, which is more of a product of this information age, is how much more blended the general population is with people in the physique sport world. It used to be something, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of tried to separate, and I just didn't want to commingle those different populations because I thought my general population clients would think it's really weird that these people are on stage, competing in bodybuilding sports and so forth. And now it's just not. Everybody has access to all the information, and a lot of the most, benign pedestrian type clients that you'd never think are interested in getting on a bodybuilding stage, suddenly they want to. So everybody's kind of exploring some of the extremes, I think, which can give people a lot of cool external goals they never had before.
yeah, that's amazing. I remember when I did my first bodybuilding competition, there was just one woman. She was a bodybuilder, so you went straight to her. And I remember my diet exactly. It was old school. It was eggs and oatmeal in the morning, protein shake later, and then 3 meals, chicken, broccoli, and potato. And I remember being at the gym and I was eating a baked potato like it was an apple. It was just so old school. And I was working in a hospital. I was a nurse's aide because I was going to school as a nurse. And I was so exhausted, like literally walking was a monumental effort. That's how drained and depleted I was. And I was looking at the patients in the bed, like wanting to be them. It was awful. Like I just wanted to be in bed. And I remember I called the gym as I just wanted to have some jelly because we had jelly at the nurse's station, and I literally called the gym and she wasn't there. And I said, well, I want to know, do you think I can have some jelly? He was her friend and he was like a big bodybuilder. He goes, no, you cannot. And I was like,
Well,
and
my blood sugar's 40. I'm passing out, and no, you cannot have glucose.
it's like the old school bodybuilder
Yeah.
diet is just what I followed, and I got shredded to the max, and my 8-pack abs. And I didn't think I did. When you're shredded and you don't think you are, how funny that is.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should have put that on my list, just how normalized now macronutrient tracking and flexible
Yes.
dieting is. As the guy who started that in the mid 90s, and I just thought this is nothing. Like it's just common sense. It's just math. Like this is not a thing. I didn't consider it a diet methodology. And now I will sometimes hear, professional athletes or actors being interviewed and they ask about their diet and they go, "Oh, yeah, I track my macros." And it's like, it's just so weird that in 30, 35 years, that has become like the most normalized way to track food for body comp control.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I try to teach my clients, you don't have to restrict because that's going to force you to binge and then restrict and binge. Like you can have the chocolate cakes, and they're still not there yet. They still think it's a diet and like, no, this is a lifestyle. If you want to do a competition, hey, we're a different playing field. You still can eat, but you have to eat a little more clean, right? So yeah, so this has been I'm just so grateful for all the experience, right? In all these years of being in bodybuilding. Um, let's just talk quickly about cardio. Like, how much do you recommend you just in general for health? And I really, enjoy cardio. So how much would you recommend it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just said it perfectly there, which is how much do you enjoy it? And I think from a minimum viable dose, here's what you should do to move versus here's how much probably is a maximum level without you having some orthopedic issues. There's some interesting research just in the last couple months of people who intermittently just increase their heart rate. So, like, let's say you're somebody who you don't work out, you don't exercise whatsoever, but once a day you run up a flight of stairs, like to get your laundry. Like those people have legitimately, fewer heart attacks just because you got some extra circulation and so forth, extra strengthening of your heart muscular, system. So then, of course, can we increase that a little bit? Can you do that a couple times a week? Can you do it 3 times a week? Can that become some form of actual structured exercise? And there are two tracks I would want people to think down. Number one, when research came out maybe 15 or so years ago that said we should all exercise intentionally 30 minutes 3 times a week, and that will help us. That will increase our lifespan and our health. And then all of a sudden it was, well, you should probably do that 5 or 6 days a week. And then it was pretty soon, it was an hour, every single day. They kept raising the bar because exercise is typically pretty, low. Could be just walking on the treadmill. Your heart rate is up 20 or 30%. And we become so sedentary as a species that level of movement doesn't even replace normal movement of 20 or 50 years ago. So I think we need to categorize just movement and low intensity exercise. If somebody says, well, I get on the treadmill, my heart rate gets up to 110, and I just kind of walk at an incline for 45 minutes, that's really not cardio. That's
Right,
movement. You're
right.
walking. So I start tracking cardio as cardio when your heart rate is closer to 130, 140, 150. Now we're in a moderate intensity state. Can you do that for 20 or 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week? can we start getting into some higher intensity work? I just challenged a client of mine who is a fairly young, healthy guy. I said, what's the highest heart rate you get to? And I think he said something like 150. And I said, well, I have a goal of 2 to 3 times a week, getting mine up to 200. And he said, how do you even do that? Like, what do you even do? And I would explain it. And I said, it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes to even get there.
Right.
I can't, like your client, do 3 minutes of steps and I'm at 177. Like, I'm healthy enough that it takes me 15 or 20 minutes of ramping up slowly, slowly, slowly. Pretty soon, I'm in a really aggressive resistance level on an arc trainer or an assault bike, and I'm just going for it. It's like high intensity interval training, and I have to go for it to get my heart rate up that high. But think of what I'm doing to my heart, my lungs, the muscular system in that cardiovascular energy system,
Amazing.
method. And so, I don't train for marathons. I'm not in CrossFit. I don't do Tough Mudders or anything like that where I need some kind of explosive strength. I'm doing it just for my own athleticism and longevity. So I think 1 to 2 times of high intensity work where you're challenging yourself, as I just described, 2 to 3 times of moderate, and now you're doing something cardiovascularly 4 or 5 times a week. If you love to train, if you love cardio, you love to train for that half a marathon once a year, something like that, you can certainly do more as your form of exercise. But just for longevity, that's kind of where I would say is right down the middle.
Perfect. All right. One more question, because I do get this a lot. I have women showing up, 130 pounds. They look fine, right? Maybe a little extra fat in their belly, and they want to lose weight. But from my experience, if they lose weight, they're going to look really skinny in the arms. Do you know what I mean? And I give them a choice. I say, listen, I would love for you for 6 months. Just don't be in a calorie deficit. Let's just build a little bit and see where that goes, because you will recomp your body if we just stay and they, no, I want to lose weight. So it's like you have to give them what they want, even though I'm trying to, from my experience and from my knowledge, trying to convince them to go the other way, right? Because a calorie deficit, when they really need to build muscle, they're going to be having that skinny fat look if they drop the weight, because they just don't have the tone underneath the skin because they haven't built the muscle. Do you have conversations with clients like that, and what would you tell them?
Certainly not to get into a cycle of just dieting and gaining weight and dieting and gaining weight, but to truly understand what maintenance looks like, both from a lifestyle perspective. This is how much food I eat in a day, in a week. There's how many times I can go out to eat and be a little indulgent. And I'm not gaining body fat, but I'm also not losing. Like that's a skill, just not only to know through metrics what that looks like in terms of macronutrients and calories, but how I function in my life. I also love to get people to think from maintenance out, because a lot of people have been errantly told by coaches, you need to eat more. You need to eat more. We need to, as a goal, we need to get your calories up to 3,000 or 2,000. And so we've had a lot of women come into our company who said, my coach made me gain 30 pounds of body fat. My coach made me gain 40 pounds. And now I'm depressed. I hate my body. I think I've ruined my body. And what a horrible thing. Again, going back to unqualified, ridiculously stupid coaches. But to say, take a break from dieting and let's practice maintenance and let's give your body a chance to stabilize metabolically. And then maybe even, how high can we take your food without gaining body fat, just to know that we're at our peak metabolic capacity. Again, all kinds of skills that people just don't even hear about from coaches who always want the extremes of, off season, pre-contest, etc. So yeah, I think that's a very valid conversation for a lot of clients to have with their coaches.
They always want to lose the weight. But that's all good. All right. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate your time. And where can people find you?
So at Joe Klemczewski is where I have Instagram and Facebook. Our YouTube channel is The Diet Doc. So a lot of our video content is there.
Very good. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, of course, just at thedietdoc.com is where you can, find me for just, touching base.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joe. It was nice to meet you. Thank you for your
Aaron,
time.
thank you.
All right.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.